Imagine standing at the edge of your existence, feeling that everything you thought you knew about life, about yourself, is now being questioned. This is the moment where ordinary reality bends, where the familiar dissolves, and a doorway opens to a consciousness deeper than any you have ever known. If you have ever felt a subtle unrest inside, a longing that the world could not satisfy, know that you are standing precisely where Thoth, the scribe of the gods, calls you to awaken. Now breathe deeply and allow yourself to sense this moment as if your soul remembers it. Write in the comments, "I am ready for my final awakening," and feel it vibrate within you. Become a member of this channel, Thoth, and step into a space reserved for those who are ready to see beyond illusion. The knowledge you will encounter here is rare, preserved in the scrolls of Hermetic wisdom, echoing the voice of the divine intelligence, the mind that observes time itself. Close your eyes for a second and feel a ripple of thought move through your mind as if it were a subtle current. Thoth, also known as Tehuti or Hermes Trismegistos, is not merely a figure of history. He is the archetype of intelligence, the guardian of records, the voice of cosmic order. In your final incarnation, every memory, every choice, every ripple of consciousness you have carried across lifetimes now converges, presenting a challenge. Will you see what is hidden behind the veil of ordinary perception? Many people report deep shifts when they start recognizing the patterns inherited from collective conditioning, the invisible frameworks that shape how they think and feel. Observe your breath as a symbol, a bridge to the mental landscapes that Thoth illuminates, the very landscapes where your mind can touch the eternal, where your soul begins to understand its own rhythm. The first obstacle is awareness. Awareness seems simple, yet it is elusive. Most live caught in repetition, in patterns learned and inherited, never questioning the source of their thoughts. In your final incarnation, the friction between what you are conditioned to believe and the subtle whispers of your inner self intensifies. Thoth represents the path of observation, the mind that records without judgment, the mirror of your own consciousness. When you sense the gap between these layers, you are invited to practice reflection. Pause. Notice a thought arise. Follow it to its source, then release it. This is not ritual. It is the science of the mind applied, the alchemy of turning thought into awareness. Time feels different here. It is not linear but layered, multidimensional. The ancient Egyptians spoke of the cycles of the soul, the eternal return, the loops of existence where lessons repeat until integrated. You are in your final incarnation, meaning the stakes are subtle yet immense. Every insight, every recognition is amplified. The scribe of the gods, Thoth, observes your mind as it navigates these cycles. Imagine your consciousness as a vast library, each memory a book, each experience a script, waiting for interpretation. In this space, you can practice reading your own history with clarity, noting the lessons without attachment, seeing the patterns of cause and effect that govern your life. Many who do this report a deep sense of liberation, a softening of the inner tension that comes from unrecognized conditioning. Symbols appear as guides. You may notice numbers, shapes, or fleeting images that resonate deeply without explanation. These are not random. They are the language of the mind that speaks directly to the archetypes you carry. Thoth embodies this language, the logos that underlies reality. When you begin to notice these patterns, allow them to be teachers. For instance, a triangle might remind you of polarity, balance, and alignment. A circle can signify cycles, rhythm, and continuity. Let these symbols awaken memory, not in the ordinary sense, but as recognition of something your soul already knows. Visualization, even brief, opens channels that words cannot always reach. The heart of this practice is transmutation, not through force but through observation and intentional presence. Each thought that arises is an opportunity to refine your energy, to align with the higher frequencies encoded in your consciousness. Imagine that your mind is like a lens focusing light from the eternal. Through clarity, the light passes without distortion. In this process, you are not attempting to escape life. You are learning to navigate its currents with precision, seeing cause and effect with heightened clarity, feeling rhythm, polarity, and the subtle flow of energy that Thoth's teachings reveal. This is the core of Hermetic practice, understanding that the universe is a mirror of the mind, that as above, so below. Your body is a field of perception. As you sense your energy, notice how thoughts, emotions, and sensations interact. Each is a clue, a piece of the puzzle guiding you toward deeper integration. The Lord of Time, Thoth, teaches that every observation matters, that the alignment of mind and body creates resonance that reverberates through the unseen dimensions. To practice, simply sit quietly, observe sensations without judgment, allow insights to arise organically. This simple act, repeated, shapes the nervous system, cultivates intuition, and strengthens connection to the archetypal intelligence guiding your evolution. Many report a heightened sense of purpose when they honor this practice consistently. Memory is a key, not just ordinary memory, but the recollection of archetypal experiences, the subtle echoes of prior lifetimes, the knowledge that your soul has accumulated. In your final incarnation, memory acts as a bridge between the known and the unknown. Thoth, as the scribe, teaches that recollection is the gateway to mastery. Begin to notice recurring themes in your life, patterns in relationships, choices that repeat. Reflect on them as data, not as judgment. In doing so, you activate a subtle transformation. Consciousness begins to organize itself around insight rather than reaction. This practice, over time, cultivates the capacity to navigate life with precision and awareness that feels almost sacred. Every interaction becomes an opportunity. Conversations, events, even fleeting moments are laboratories for insight. Thoth's energy invites you to notice subtle cues, the silent language of presence. When someone speaks, listen not only to words, but to the currents behind them, the patterns they evoke in your mind. Observation without attachment is the practice, the method, by which your soul discerns truth from conditioning. As you engage with life this way, you begin to notice that patterns of behavior are neither punishment nor reward. They are information. And information, when understood, is the currency of transformation, the tool with which you can shape perception and align with your highest potential. The mind and its patterns are central. Conditioning from collective dynamics shapes thought processes subtly, often invisibly. In your final incarnation, these patterns can appear as subtle resistance, doubt, or distraction. Thoth teaches that observation alone, without attachment, initiates transformation. Imagine watching a river flow without stepping in. Thoughts are like water, ever moving, reflecting light differently at each moment. By noticing without clinging, by understanding polarity and rhythm, you begin to cultivate a state of consciousness that is awake, precise, and fluid, a state where the mind itself becomes a vessel for insight. As your awareness deepens, synchronicity increases. Events, signs, coincidences may appear more meaningful. These are not magic, not randomness. They are reflections of alignment between your inner perception and the subtle currents of the cosmos. Thoth, the cosmic scribe, guides you in reading these signs as language. Begin by noting small synchronicities, patterns in timing, repeated symbols, or intuitive nudges. Recording them, reflecting on their meaning, helps organize consciousness in alignment with universal principles. This practice fosters a sense of resonance and flow, a connection with the archetypal intelligence that permeates all experience. Silence holds power. Beyond words, beyond images, lies the space where the mind encounters itself. In this silence, Thoth's voice is felt, not heard. The archetypes communicate through subtle impressions, images, and knowing. By cultivating moments of quiet reflection daily, even briefly, you strengthen the channels of inner guidance. Observe thoughts arise and fade, sensations fluctuate, emotions shift, all while maintaining the awareness of the silent observer. This simple yet profound practice can unlock deep clarity, aligning perception with insight that feels timeless and expansive. Your intuition sharpens as these practices integrate. Intuition is not mysterious. It is recognition of patterns, immediate alignment with archetypal truths. In your final incarnation, intuitive insight is amplified, offering glimpses into possibilities, understanding consequences before they unfold, sensing the harmony of your choices with broader rhythms. Trust these moments as indicators, not instructions, allowing them to guide reflection and conscious action. Many report that acting in alignment with intuitive signals deepens presence and reduces unnecessary struggle. The cycle of reflection continues. Every choice, every observation reinforces awareness. Thoth teaches that mastery is iterative, cumulative. The more you observe without attachment, the more subtle your perception becomes. The awareness of polarity, rhythm, and mental causation begins to feel natural. Each insight adds another layer of understanding to the archetypal structures guiding consciousness. This is not something to grasp intellectually alone, but something to experience internally, sensing the resonance of each realization throughout mind and body. As your perception sharpens, discernment grows, not in judgment, but in understanding. The patterns of the world, the inherited templates of thought, the subtle influences of collective dynamics, all become visible as information. Thoth embodies this principle, showing that knowledge is not accumulation, but clarity. By seeing clearly, you can navigate life with awareness rather than reaction. Small practices, like observing patterns of behavior in yourself and others, noting emotional responses, and reflecting on outcomes, are gateways to this clarity. Your inner library expands. Each observation, insight, and recognition is a book on a shelf, a record in the archives of consciousness. In your final incarnation, the volume of information is vast, but the key is organization and accessibility. Thoth's archetype teaches that alignment and synthesis of knowledge allow action with precision. Imagine walking through this library with a candle, illuminating books that contain keys to understanding your patterns and potentials. Over time, this internal organization enhances decision-making, emotional balance, and alignment with your soul's purpose. The principle of cause and effect becomes palpable. Observing consequences, tracing outcomes, recognizing patterns of energy and thought cultivates a subtle mastery over life's flow. Thoth emphasizes rhythm and polarity. For every action, a reaction. For every tension, a resolution. This understanding is not theoretical, it is experiential. You begin to notice that choices aligned with insight create resonance, while those aligned with reaction perpetuate cycles of unconscious patterns. Reflection and observation serve as tools to discern, navigate, and refine alignment. Visualizations deepen comprehension. By imagining archetypal symbols, flows of energy, and internal landscapes, the mind activates subtle awareness that words alone cannot convey. Triangles, circles, spirals, and sacred geometric forms serve as reminders of polarity, rhythm, and balance. Thoth's teachings emphasize that these forms encode wisdom, offering pathways for insight when observed internally. Even brief visualizations repeated over time reinforce perception, understanding, and alignment with the mind of the cosmos. Energy is subtle but present. You may feel shifts in attention, focus, emotional resonance, or clarity. Thoth's guidance reminds you that perception itself generates influence. Consciousness shapes reality by its orientation. Observing thoughts, noting responses, and refining focus aligns your energy with principles of harmony, rhythm, and polarity. Many who practice consistently experience a deepened sense of presence, subtle attunement to internal and external currents, and an increased ability to respond rather than react. This is the essence of self-directed transmutation. The concept of as above, so below becomes tangible. You begin to see correspondences between internal states and external experiences, recognizing that the mind reflects universal patterns. Thoth, as the cosmic scribe, exemplifies this principle through archetypal guidance. Observing your own mental landscapes, noting patterns, aligning perception, and integrating insights create harmony with broader cosmic rhythms. This principle, once internalized, enhances clarity, decision-making, and alignment with your soul's trajectory. Attention to subtle details enhances mastery. Small choices, fleeting thoughts, and minor reactions contain encoded information. Thoth's archetype encourages noticing these details, reflecting on them, and integrating their lessons. Over time, this practice cultivates sensitivity to energy, rhythm, and polarity, enhancing your ability to navigate life with insight rather than habit. Even small recognitions reinforce the process of internal transmutation and alignment with higher-order consciousness. Symbols, archetypes, and internal images converge to guide insight. They serve as language of the mind, mirrors of consciousness, and keys to integration. Observing their recurrence, resonance, and personal significance deepens understanding. Thoth's teachings show that when you interact consciously with these symbols, you activate pathways of perception that expand insight and refine alignment. This is the essence of internal navigation, cultivating awareness and presence that shapes both internal and external experience. Finally, remember that this is not a finite process. Each insight opens doors to further perception. Your final incarnation is a continuum of awakening, observation, and refinement. Thoth, the scribe of the gods, whispers not with voice but with presence, guiding recognition, reflection, and alignment. Ask yourself now, what patterns am I noticing that reflect my deeper self? How does my awareness influence my choices? What subtle signs am I observing that point toward my next insight? Keep observing, keep reflecting, and allow the resonance of these teachings to continue unfolding within you as the journey of awakening never truly ends, only deepens. Now, sense the quiet tension beneath every thought, the subtle pressure of existence shaping your awareness without you noticing. Thoth's presence is not external. It is woven into the architecture of your mind, a silent observer that measures the precision of your attention. As you perceive your internal landscape, notice how patterns emerge not as guidance from outside, but as reflections of choices long embedded in the fibers of your consciousness. Each fleeting emotion, each impulsive reaction, is a cipher of energy, inviting you to translate and transmute it into clarity. Observe how the mind attempts to rationalize, how it seeks linear cause in a multidimensional flow, and recognize that understanding arises in the spaces between logic and intuition, where the unseen currents carry the weight of archetypal truth. Every heartbeat, every pause, is a note in the symphony that Thoth orchestrates silently, revealing that what you thought was chaos is in fact precise design. You may feel discomfort, but it is the friction of awakening, the pressure that polishes perception into a sharper lens, allowing insights previously imperceptible to pierce awareness. Let this tension become a teacher, a doorway into understanding that the mind itself is both the student and the master, and that reality, as you sense it, is a mirror refined by observation and resonance. Consider the landscape of memory, not as a static archive, but as a living network where connections pulse, shift, and reconfigure. The familiar narratives you carry are not limitations, they are raw material for discernment and integration. Thoth's influence reminds you that time is not sequential here, that reflection can ripple backward and forward simultaneously. Notice the seeming paradox. The very thoughts that once constrained you can become the instruments of liberation if observed without attachment. Each memory, each repetition contains hidden resonance. Each pattern is an opportunity to sense its underlying principle and extract insight. The mind tends to resist this, seeking certainty and predictability, yet the real transformation occurs precisely where predictability ends. Imagine a library where books rewrite themselves with every observation, where the act of noticing alters the content. This is the subtle alchemy Thoth teaches. Your attention, once harnessed deliberately, becomes the lens that both observes and shapes the unfolding patterns of your own consciousness. Shift now to the experience of energy within the body, the currents that flow silently beneath thought and sensation. You may notice subtle vibrations, shifts of warmth or pressure, or even moments of stillness. These are not anomalies, they are the language of the subtle self, and Thoth's archetypal presence invites you to translate these signals into understanding. Observe how the body responds to your focus, how each movement of awareness alters tension and clarity. The practice here is not effort, but attunement, to notice, to sense, to allow resonance to emerge. Through this, you begin to perceive the connection between internal energy and external manifestation, between the archetypes you carry and the cycles unfolding around you. Many who approach these moments with sustained attention report a quiet recalibration, a harmonization that feels invisible, yet profoundly tangible. This is the space where subtle discernment arises, where thought and sensation converge to illuminate hidden structures of perception. Symbols will begin to surface spontaneously, seemingly trivial or abstract, yet imbued with significance. A triangle, a spiral, a fleeting image may appear in your mind's eye or in moments of reflection. These are not decorative. They are instructions encoded in consciousness, miniatures of universal principles. Thoth, as the cosmic scribe, teaches that perception of symbols is not passive, but active. To see is to participate. Approach each image with curiosity, noticing its texture, movement, and context. Reflect on how it resonates with your current emotional and mental state. Let the symbol guide you in recognizing relationships between internal impulses and external expressions. This is not literal interpretation, it is intuitive translation. In doing so, your awareness expands subtly, revealing layers of comprehension inaccessible through linear reasoning alone. Each symbol becomes a key to integrating experience, perception, and insight into a coherent rhythm that aligns with the mind of the universe. Now consider rhythm and polarity in your daily life. Every choice, every interaction contains echoes of cosmic principles. Polarity is present in your emotional fluctuations, in the tension between desire and restraint, attraction and repulsion. Rhythm manifests in cycles of thought, attention, and activity. Thoth's teachings reveal that observing these patterns without resistance is the path to alignment. You do not manipulate the flow, you calibrate perception to its movement. Many who undertake this practice notice that what once seemed chaotic becomes structured, predictable in subtle ways, revealing the hidden architecture of consciousness. By observing rhythm and polarity within yourself, you engage in a form of self-guided initiation, a discovery of principle rather than doctrine. Each moment becomes a laboratory for awareness, a chance to practice discernment and resonance. Notice now how silence frames every perception. Between thoughts, between words, between images, lies an expansive field where insight moves freely. Thoth's presence resonates in these gaps, teaching that the mind does not need constant stimulation to know. In silence, the mind recognizes patterns without force. Intuitions arise unbidden, and the body integrates subtle currents effortlessly. Practice noticing the intervals between breath, between thought, between heartbeat. These spaces are not empty. They are the medium of consciousness itself, where memory, intuition, and archetypal resonance converge. By cultivating awareness of these intervals, you allow the mind to function as both observer and participant, experiencing the subtle interplay of cause and effect, energy and attention, internal and external correspondence. Reflection deepens when you examine expectation. Most assume that insight will arrive fully formed, that understanding will manifest as certainty. Yet, in your final incarnation, realization often emerges through nuance, subtle recognition, and iterative adjustment. Thoth teaches that observation without expectation yields clarity, while clinging to preconceived outcomes obstructs perception. Consider how resistance manifests in your mind: impatience, doubt, distraction. These are not failures, they are signals, markers indicating where attention requires refinement. Observe them as information. Each recognition, each pause, creates a resonance that aligns mind and perception with subtler dimensions of insight. The paradox is that effort often impedes awakening. Stillness and observation catalyze transformation. Shift your attention to interaction with others. Every conversation is a reflection of internal states, a mirror of unseen currents. Thoth's archetype encourages perceiving beyond surface words, recognizing patterns of attention, resonance, and polarity in communication. Notice how your responses are informed by habit, emotional residue, or collective conditioning. Pause, observe, and allow new alignments to emerge naturally. The act of listening without reaction cultivates subtle mastery. You observe the dance of consciousness, perceiving both form and essence. This engagement reveals patterns not only in others, but in yourself, illustrating the principle that perception is reciprocal. Understanding emerges as awareness interacts with the mirrored complexity of life. Focus now on time as a malleable dimension, a medium rather than a constraint. In your final incarnation, linear chronology appears insufficient. Moments contain layers, echoes, and reflections across consciousness. Thoth's guidance emphasizes that observing connections between these layers generates insight. By noting recurring patterns, synchronicities, and repetitions, you perceive a deeper architecture. Time is simultaneously a teacher and a canvas, a field where your mind can practice alignment with principle rather than reaction. Each observation compounds subtle awareness, creating a temporal depth where past, present, and potential converge. This awareness fosters understanding of cycles and resonance without reliance on external validation. Energy flows subtly through every choice. Observe how attention, focus, and intent shape internal and external experience. Thoth's archetype teaches that consciousness is an instrument. How it is directed influences perception and integration. Each recognition, however small, refines the lens of awareness. Notice fluctuations in mental clarity, emotional tone, or bodily sensation. These are indicators, signposts of alignment. Observing them without attachment allows insight to crystallize. The paradox here is that influence arises not from force but from precision of perception. Awareness becomes the tool by which you navigate layers of reality, integrating archetypal wisdom into lived experience. Memory, once examined, reveals networks rather than isolated events. Each recollection connects to subtle patterns, resonances, and archetypes. Thoth's role is to illuminate these connections, showing that memory is not static but dynamic, a living structure reflecting principle and resonance. Observe repeating motifs, emotional responses, and decision patterns. Reflection without attachment reorganizes these networks, enhancing insight and alignment. This practice demonstrates that clarity is emergent, arising from active observation rather than imposed understanding. By tracing these threads, you participate in the process of internal harmonization, strengthening perception and integration. Symbols now gain density and meaning. Their recurrence, texture, and resonance are keys to understanding subtle principles. Thoth's archetypal guidance encourages noticing, interpreting, and integrating these symbols into perception. Observe how internal images correlate with external events, emotional states, and thought patterns. Each symbol acts as a bridge, connecting conscious recognition with deeper archetypal intelligence. Practice seeing symbols as fluid rather than fixed, evolving with perception. This approach transforms symbolic recognition into a tool of insight, alignment, and resonance. The language of consciousness communicates directly when attention is calibrated to notice and interpret. Internal observation sharpens the mind's acuity. Polarity, rhythm, and subtle resonance become noticeable as attention deepens. Thoth emphasizes that awareness is itself a force, structuring perception, energy, and integration. Each subtle recognition refines discernment, noticing repetition, resonance, or fluctuation within thought, feeling, or sensation. Observation without attachment produces clarity, allowing insight to emerge naturally. Each micro-practice compounds, creating a momentum where perception continuously refines itself. The mind becomes a vessel for insight, a responsive instrument attuned to archetypal principles. Consider the interplay of subtle energy and conscious choice. Each decision, thought, or observation contributes to internal calibration. Thoth teaches that mastery is iterative, cumulative, and experiential. Small, deliberate recognitions build momentum, creating resonance that shapes both perception and alignment. Observe the emergence of subtle influence, the quiet adjustments in attention and sensation. This practice illustrates that transformation is not sudden but progressive, arising from the disciplined observation of what seems ordinary, yet contains extraordinary depth. Awareness becomes the medium through which subtle transmutation unfolds. Reflection on the self as both observer and participant deepens understanding. You are not separate from the currents you notice. You are the instrument through which patterns are revealed. Thoth embodies this principle. Consciousness itself is the field and the agent. Observing without reaction allows the mind to resonate with deeper structures, clarifying perception and aligning attention. Each insight, subtle or striking, integrates into the internal framework, enhancing discernment, awareness, and alignment. Recognition unfolds naturally when the observer participates consciously in observation, bridging internal and external perception. Awareness of cycles amplifies clarity, patterns repeat across thought, emotion, and circumstance. Thoth's teachings reveal that observing repetition uncovers principle. Each recurrence is not coincidence, but coded reflection of alignment and resonance. Noticing subtle shifts between cycles creates insight. Where attention was reactive, now it is deliberate. Where understanding was partial, it becomes coherent. Awareness becomes a lens through which the architecture of existence is sensed. Practice noticing rhythm and recurrence in everyday life, and observe how perception adapts, how insight emerges from patterns previously invisible. The mind's capacity to synthesize emerges through sustained observation. Connections between memory, energy, symbol, and perception coalesce into coherent insight. Thoth's archetype demonstrates that synthesis is not learned but revealed through attention. Notice subtle alignments, coincidences, and resonances. Reflection without attachment allows integration. Each observation compounds, enhancing clarity, alignment, and resonance. Awareness becomes active, shaping perception and internal understanding without force. The observer becomes both lens and instrument, refining consciousness continuously. Presence in silence deepens observation. Between thought, breath, and emotion exists an expansive field where subtle principles resonate. Thoth's guidance is not heard but felt, instructing through archetypal patterns, symbols, and resonance. Cultivate attention to these intervals. Note the quality of thought, sensation, and perception within them. Insight emerges naturally when attention is attuned to these subtleties. Awareness becomes a practice, a tool of alignment, and a means of perceiving the architecture underlying mind, energy, and pattern. Observation refines perception, revealing structure, principle, and resonance in what seemed ordinary. Attention to micro-responses enhances mastery. Observe tiny shifts in focus, subtle reactions to sensation, and fluctuations of thought. Thoth's archetype illuminates the significance of these micro-patterns. Reflection and observation refine awareness, enabling recognition of underlying structures. Each micro-practice compounds, creating subtle recalibration in attention, energy, and perception. The paradox is that influence grows not through force, but precision of perception. Awareness structures itself when practiced deliberately, revealing principle and alignment in every facet of experience. Symbols, energy, and reflection converge in layered observation. Each thought, memory, or sensation can act as a portal to archetypal intelligence. Thoth's teachings show that perception aligned with principle produces resonance, insight, and integration. Observe how symbols, internal images, and energy patterns interconnect. Subtle attention activates awareness, producing clarity, alignment, and resonance that extend beyond ordinary perception. The mind becomes a vessel for understanding, a responsive field attuned to archetypal structures. Observation transforms awareness, perception, and integration into a continuous unfolding of insight. Contemplation of interconnectedness reveals hidden architecture. Your mind, body, energy, and perception exist as a unified system. Thoth teaches that understanding arises when attention perceives connections rather than fragments. Observe relationships between thought, sensation, emotion, and pattern. Each recognition enhances clarity, discernment, and alignment. Awareness becomes iterative, continuous, and layered. The mind begins to perceive principle in motion, resonance in cycles, and structure in subtle energies. Observation becomes both tool and medium, revealing patterns that inform further reflection and perception. Patterns unfold endlessly, inviting further observation. Each insight opens a doorway to deeper perception, each symbol a key to alignment. Thoth's archetype demonstrates that mastery is a continuous, iterative practice. Observe subtle repetition, resonance, and polarity in thought, emotion, and energy. Reflect without attachment, integrating observations into coherent understanding. Awareness sharpens as observation compounds and perception becomes increasingly precise. What patterns are emerging now that you had not noticed before? Which subtle signs are guiding your attention toward deeper insight? How does the resonance of your inner observation shape the unfolding of your perception? Shift your awareness to the spaces between perception and reflection, the silent currents where insight begins to stir. Thoth, as the archetype of intelligence, reminds you that the mind is not merely a receiver of information, but a lens that refracts reality itself. Notice how expectations dissolve when you focus on subtle cues, on fleeting patterns, and on the invisible threads connecting thought, sensation, and intuition. Every decision you've ever made, every fleeting impulse, carries resonance beyond the immediate. Observing these layers without interference, without judgment, cultivates precision in perception. You may begin to sense that understanding does not come from accumulation of knowledge, but from the refinement of attention. As this clarity deepens, the mind becomes both a mirror and a sculptor, reflecting patterns while shaping awareness. Feel the tension between the urge to act and the stillness that invites perception, recognizing that mastery often unfolds in the quiet pauses rather than in forceful motion. The subtle shift occurs when observation replaces reaction, when noticing becomes creation, and when the mind itself becomes a channel for archetypal intelligence. Consider the interplay of shadow and reflection within thought. Patterns you assumed were fixed now reveal elasticity. Habitual interpretations loosen under subtle observation. Thoth's guidance shows that perceived limitations are often thresholds, invitations to recognize principle rather than outcomes. As you track the interplay of internal responses, notice how awareness bends previously rigid patterns, allowing insight to penetrate deeper than analysis alone could achieve. Emotional resonance, previously a compass for reaction, becomes a map for discernment. Each moment, each impulse, is an opportunity to trace cause and effect internally, revealing not only habitual structures, but the underlying intelligence that orchestrates them. Observation here is not passive. It actively reshapes perception without force, producing an internal alignment that feels almost imperceptible yet profoundly tangible. The paradox is clear. By surrendering the need to control, you gain precision in influence over consciousness. Turn now to the architecture of attention. Most assume it is directed by choice, yet subtle currents shape focus before you are aware. Thoth's archetype illuminates how attention is the currency of alignment, the medium through which consciousness interacts with principle. Observing where attention drifts what absorbs your energy, and how subtle stimuli affect your focus, uncovers hidden structures of thought. Each recognition, no matter how slight, is an adjustment in the internal field, a calibration of resonance. Through this continuous refinement, perception sharpens, allowing the mind to discern layers of meaning previously invisible. Awareness becomes iterative and dynamic, a self-organizing field where observation itself generates insight. The more precise your attention, the more fluid your internal landscape, and the more responsive you become to subtle currents of archetypal truth. Energy patterns in the body now invite observation. Subtle fluctuations of warmth, pressure, or sensation are not incidental. They reflect the internal flow of awareness interacting with perception. Thoth teaches that these currents contain information, markers for alignment, and integration. Observe without judgment, noting rhythms, cycles, and polarity in sensation. Over time, these micro-observations accumulate, producing a resonance that extends beyond the body into mental clarity and emotional coherence. The paradox unfolds. The body is not merely a vessel, but a field of intelligence, responding to observation, attention, and subtle reflection. Recognizing this allows navigation through both internal and external realities with fluidity and precision. Awareness becomes a guide, a lens, and an instrument of subtle transformation. Shift attention to symbols that emerge spontaneously in thought or vision. These may appear as geometric forms, fleeting images, or resonant patterns. Each symbol encodes principle, not story. Each carries subtle instruction for perception rather than literal action. Thoth's archetype demonstrates that these appearances are mirrors of consciousness, providing opportunities for internal calibration. Observe the symbol, notice its texture, form, and relationship to current mental and emotional states. Reflection transforms the symbol from passive imagery into a tool of insight. Patterns that initially appear random reveal order when attention perceives resonance. Each encounter strengthens the capacity to integrate archetypal intelligence into lived awareness, refining alignment with principle and deepening understanding of internal and external interplay. Consider the rhythm of thought as a flowing current. It is not linear, but layered, interweaving perception, memory, and intuition. Thoth's guidance emphasizes that observing rhythm without interference reveals its architecture. Each fluctuation, pause, or repetition contains subtle guidance. By noting rhythm, you learn to predict currents, harmonize attention, and recognize cycles without external prompts. Observation becomes active participation. Your mind tunes to the cadence of consciousness, perceives polarity, and discerns subtleties that escape casual notice. Awareness transforms into a form of mastery, not by altering the external world, but by recalibrating internal perception. The rhythm of thought is a teacher, offering insight into flow, resonance, and the timing of aligned action. Notice the interweaving of emotion and perception. Emotions are often assumed to obscure clarity, yet when observed deliberately, they reveal subtle information about internal alignment and resonance. Thoth's archetype illustrates that emotional currents are data, not directives. Observing without judgment transforms the mind's relationship with emotion, producing discernment without suppression. Subtle recognition of polarity within emotional responses illuminates patterns of attention and energy previously hidden. Each observation is a refinement, a calibration, and an integration of principle. Emotional resonance, once chaotic, becomes structured, fluid, and aligned with deeper perception. The mind learns to read energy and pattern simultaneously, refining insight with precision. Memory, when examined through refined observation, becomes dynamic rather than static. Patterns, associations, and subtle recurring motifs emerge. Thoth teaches that these are not mere recollections, but living structures offering guidance. Observation without attachment allows integration, revealing archetypal intelligence embedded in recollection. As recognition deepens, previously unnoticed connections surface, demonstrating that memory is an instrument of alignment rather than constraint. Each insight strengthens resonance, clarity, and discernment. The paradox is evident. Understanding emerges not from control of memory, but from attentive observation, allowing latent structures to inform perception. The mind becomes an active participant in its own organization, focus on subtle perception in interaction with others. Conversations, gestures, and even silence carry resonance that reflects both internal and external patterns. Thoth's guidance emphasizes observing dynamics without reaction, noting polarity, rhythm, and alignment. Awareness of subtle cues allows perception of patterns invisible to habitual attention. Each interaction becomes a mirror, revealing structure, resonance, and principle. Observation without attachment is mastery. It allows integration of subtle intelligence into practical experience. Awareness transforms ordinary engagement into a laboratory for perception, where the mind continuously calibrates to archetypal currents. Each recognition deepens clarity, extending insight into subtle fields of consciousness. Consider time as an elastic, multidimensional medium. Linear expectation gives way to layered perception. In your final incarnation, this flexibility amplifies insight. Thoth illustrates that time is a canvas for observation, reflection, and pattern recognition. Observing recurrence, resonance, and cycles produces understanding beyond conventional causality. The mind begins to sense principle rather than sequence, aligning perception with multidimensional currents. Each observation generates further layers, subtle yet profound. Awareness becomes recursive, iterative, and expansive, reinforcing discernment, rhythm, and internal calibration. The experience of time transforms into a field for refined observation, subtle resonance, and perceptual precision. Energy flows continuously through thought, sensation, and attention. Subtle shifts carry information. Perception translates them into insight. Thoth teaches that consciousness itself is a medium for alignment. Observing these flows without interference allows awareness to refine and calibrate internal resonance. Each micro-observation compounds, producing clarity, alignment, and integration. The paradox emerges. Influence arises not from external control, but from precision observation. The mind, body, and perception harmonize through attentive noticing, producing subtle mastery that guides action, reflection, and understanding. Awareness becomes both lens and instrument, shaping perception without imposition. Symbols gain density, connecting internal and external layers. Each repetition, image, or resonance serves as a key for perception and alignment. Thoth's archetype illuminates their meaning without forcing interpretation. Observation transforms symbol into tool. Noticing texture, pattern, and context activates insight. Reflection integrates these elements into perception, producing resonance, clarity, and alignment. Symbols interact with thought, emotion, and sensation, forming a network of internal intelligence. Awareness becomes an instrument of subtle synthesis, connecting archetypal principle with lived experience. Observation itself becomes the act of translation, revealing coherence within apparent randomness. Internal attention sharpens through iterative observation. Polarity, rhythm, and resonance emerge as perceivable structures. Thoth teaches that subtle alignment refines perception, transforming ordinary awareness into precise observation. Micro-recognition accumulates, producing clarity and calibration. Awareness itself is the tool, observation the medium, resonance the measure. Subtle recognition informs thought, action, and reflection, producing integration across layers of consciousness. Observation creates internal order, revealing principle without reliance on external guidance. The paradox is that mastery is effortless when attention is precise and non-interfering. Micro-responses within perception indicate alignment. Each subtle shift, emotional tremor, or thought fluctuation carries information. Thoth's guidance illuminates these indicators, showing that consciousness self-calibrates when observed. Observation without attachment strengthens discernment and awareness. Each recognition compounds, producing refinement, resonance, and subtle mastery. Influence arises not from force, but from precision of perception. Awareness aligns with principle, integrating symbol, pattern, and energy into cohesive understanding. Subtle practice develops a feedback loop. Observation generates insight. Insight guides attention, and attention refines observation further. Patterns, energy, and symbols converge. Each element, when noticed, interacts with others, producing multi-layered perception. Thoth illustrates that these convergences are not coincidence, but reflection of internal and archetypal intelligence. Observing relationships between elements fosters resonance, clarity, and integration. Awareness becomes self-reinforcing. Recognition enhances observation, observation deepens understanding, and understanding refines alignment. Perception becomes iterative, dynamic, and responsive. Each observation opens new perspectives, inviting continuous refinement and discovery. Before you continue this journey, write in the comments, "I acknowledge my final incarnation and open to Thoth's guidance." This is your key, a symbolic seal that aligns intent with awareness, a commitment to expand perception and integrate insight. Recognize the invitation. Joining this circle is not passive. To become part of this sacred thread, allow your presence to resonate with the channel, marking alignment with those who walk the path of internal mastery. The essence remains. Awareness unfolds beyond expectation. Perception sharpens in silence, and each moment contains the echo of intelligence that shapes understanding without force. The journey continues, perception deepens, and subtle currents invite further exploration, revealing layers unseen yet profoundly felt. Join the sacred circle today. Become a member of the Thoth channel and secure your place among those who actively align with higher wisdom, gaining exclusive access to insights and guidance that resonate with your path of internal mastery.